Welcome to the War Room. It's Natalie Winters, and today is June 30th, year of our Lord 2023. It's obviously not Stephen K. Bannon hosting Friday afternoon edition of War Room today. You've probably noticed that by now. I'm filling in. He'll be back at the 6 p.m. hour and, of course, tomorrow for the morning show. But in the meantime, today is a very, very important day. And I say that because it's the day that the global elite really played their deck of cards, showed us their hand when it comes to what exactly they want to do, their end game, with Donald J. Trump. They want to ensure not just that he can never be president again, but that he can never run for office again. We, of course, know they've been doing this with the indictments, the arraignments, the January 6th committee, the 14th Amendment. But saying the quiet part out loud and actually making it happen, we need to look no further than the country of Brazil, where Jair Bolsonaro, who lost his election, allegedly, emphasis on allegedly, by about 1.8%, one of the slimmest margins in the history of the country. Again, we know there was a lot of interesting inconsistencies when it comes to the voting machines there. Of course, Soros money, Chinese Communist Party influence, making that electoral outcome certainly not certifiable, to say the least. But today, he's actually been banned from running for office until 2030. That is 8 years, basically 2 cycles. Keep in mind, yes, it's happening in Brazil, not that far from us here in the United States, but that's exactly what they want to do to Donald J. Trump. So joining us to help break down what exactly is going on in Brazil and how it, of course, interfaces with the deep state assault on Donald J. Trump here in the United States is a wonderful friend of the show and Brazilian journalist. I'm going to try to pronounce his name correctly. Paulo Figueiredo. I think I did that right, maybe with a little bit of a Valley Girl flair. But if you could just walk the audience through what exactly happened in Brazil today before we get in to even more of the signal and not just the noise.
Well, Natalie, thanks for having me. You look way better than Steve, so I think it's good for the audience to have you filling in. So what happened? I'm making a joke here, but this is a very sad day for Brazil. Not unexpected, but very sad. Brazil has a centralized superior court that oversees all the elections in the country, and today they have convicted former President Jair Bolsonaro of political abuse of power and improper use of media. And that was because he held a meeting earlier last year with ambassadors from several countries where he denounced the problems with Brazilian electoral system. So that was a big no-no for the establishment. And now with this decision, the court has declared that Bolsonaro is ineligible for any office for 8 years, meaning until 2030. So, as you know, Bolsonaro was the first conservative president that Brazil had since 1985. He was in office from 2019 until last year, when he, like you well said, supposedly lost an election that was marred by allegations of lack of transparency, and he lost it supposedly again to the former, to the communists and former corruption convicts, because they nullified his conviction, but he was convicted for corruption. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who is the sitting president in Brazil right now. So that's what happened. The establishment through courts, they were able to make Bolsonaro ineligible to hold any office in the Brazilian politics for until 2030. He is almost 70 years old, meaning, you have Trump that's almost 80 and he's in good shape. We don't know if Bolsonaro will be in that many of a great shape in 2030, but that pretty much makes him out of politics if the current regime stays in place in Brazil.
Seems like Brazil really has become a playground for some of the most nefarious forces in politics today, whether it's the Chinese Communist Party coming after your natural resources, or, of course, money coming from people like George Soros and sort of the more globalist left. But it really seems like the cardinal sin that Bolsonaro dared to make was just to criticize the election process. It's not like he actually committed any tangible crimes in the colloquial or definitional sense of the word. So from your opinion, you're obviously a famous journalist. You're very, boots on the ground in terms of what's happening in Brazil. The pressure that is being mounted against Bolsonaro, where do you think it's exactly coming from? In other words, do you think this is something that Brazilians want, that this court is just sort of acting independently and pursuing for? Or do you think there's more international global forces at play that are trying to really, I think, make him sort of what is a political voodoo doll for Donald Trump? In other words, they want to do what they want to do to Donald Trump, but their kind of dry run is going to be doing it with Bolsonaro down in Brazil.
Well, Brazil ceased to be a democracy, a democratic system for quite some time now. Since in the last few years, we've been seeing more and more of our institutions eroding. This decision specifically, everybody knows it lacks any legal basis. All the judges are aware of that. It serves two purposes. The first, to ensure that Bolsonaro has no chance of returning to power or even participating in further elections. He's out of the scene. And second, to send a message that any questioning of the Brazilian electoral system, which is laughable, will be severely punished. So it is there's an strong, therefore, a strong intimidating effect. So as a result, no politician will be able to propose any changes to the current system, and that will ensure that the games remains rigged by them forever. So it's a landmark decision that marks the end of any semblance of electoral transparency, and it is a severe assault on freedom of speech, which should be guaranteed by the Brazilian constitution in theory. But gradually, in the last years, more and more power has been transferred from the people, from the electoral system, from the voting people to the courts. And Brazil is transforming from this former democracy into now a juristocracy. So the judges rule the country now. And that mirrors the same mindset that is of what's happening to Donald Trump in the United States, but with the difference, the Brazilian democratic institutions are weaker, and Brazil has this centralized electoral court controlled by left-leaning judges who are political opponents of Bolsonaro, progressive justice, and this makes made everything easier than it would be in the United States for now, because I've been watching what's been happening here in the U.S. very closely, and keep in mind, this was just 1 out of 16 lawsuits against Jair Bolsonaro in the electoral courts. 16. How can anyone survive or defend themselves against this? It's a clear weaponization of the judicial system. So that's how eager they were. They convicted him on the first charges. So, and ever since he made the mistake of leaving the United States, he was here. He has been here he stayed here until March, I believe, from December to March. Ever since he returned to Brazil, has been questioned by the federal police 5 times. Deposed 5 times on the federal police. And there are multiple criminal cases against him pending on the Supreme Court. And notice, none of them are corruption charges. They're all political cases. The one who had corruption charges and was convicted is actually the current sitting president of Brazil, Lula. Bolsonaro doesn't have any corruption allegations at all, but he did something far worse. He displeased the establishment, just like Donald Trump. And mark my words, Natalie, and this is my bad, he will be arrested soon. I'll be back here talking about Jair Bolsonaro being arrested. They have already conducted a search and seizure at his residence in a fishing expedition. I don't know if that sounds familiar to the American audience, but I bet he'll soon be arrested.
It's clear the global elite does not want populism in any way, shape, or form, and they must suppress it really at any and at all costs. We've got a few minutes before I got to let you go, but I'm just curious, sort of put us on the ground in Brazil. How does this impact the future of the Bolsonaro movement, his supporters, the people who really are populist to their core, reject the Chinese Communist Party influence, reject the Marxist influence? Are they, dissuaded by this, or does this make them double down in their efforts to save Brazil?
Well, I mean, the population is still, it's becoming actually more and more conservative and more populist. So Brazil was dominated by the left for many, many years until in recent years, after the Donald Trump phenomenon, Brazil started to change. And Jair Bolsonaro was the first big, like I said, the first conservative that we had since 1985. So the population, and he lost, like you said, by a tiny margin, a little more than 1%. So even with the rigged system that we have, rigged electoral system with a lack of transparency, with them making decisions that favored Lula throughout the whole race. So the population, people are becoming more populist, more conservative, more towards. So it's good. But the establishment is so powerful that the votes, they don't matter anymore. The courts matter. The politicians don't matter. What matters are the courts and the establishment. And which is very sad, because for me, that I live here, I've been living here for 8 years now in the United States, but as you know, based here close to Miami, and it's actually very sad for me to see that Brazil and the United States, we both have the same virus. The United States has a better, it's a healthier individual. So Brazilian institutions and the immune system is weaker, but the virus is the same. And it's good that I'm here, because Americans need to pay close attention to that. Brazil is not a minor player in the world stage. It is the largest economy in South America, one of the top 10 economies globally, and strategically, the fourth largest food producer in the world, the second largest producer of iron ore, and a significant player in the energy sector. So it's everything that you need from a geopolitical perspective. Brazil is very important. And it looks, as a fact, that CCP seems to understand, the Chinese Communist Party seems to understand that better than us in the United States. We should be working to, and I mean that United States and Brazil, America should be working to forge stronger ties with Brazil, encouraging it towards democratic and capitalist values, rather than standing by as Brazil deepens its ties with communist and autocratic regimes around the globe. And that's what's been going on right now. So I urge American Congress members, American conservative leaders to pay a closer attention to Brazil. There was a piece in the Financial Times last week saying that the American left, Joe Biden and his administration, they influenced Brazilian elections, helping Lula to get elected. It was a piece published on the Financial Times. They were bragging about it. So Republicans and conservatives, they need to do more in order to put pressure on the other direction. So members of Congress, make speeches on the floor, write letters, do stuff, because Brazil is influenced by the United States.
If people want to follow you and your work and really understand the importance of what Americans can do to help the situation there, where can they find you? Where can they go?
Well, I'm on every social media there is, and I'm at Rio P. Figueiredo, my last name. So that's very easy, at Rio P. Figueiredo.
Paulo, thank you so much for joining us.
Eu tentei avisar. Desde 2020, eu venho gritando com todo o ar dos meus pulmões, como uma voz no deserto. O fim da América seria o fim do Brasil e do mundo como conhecemos. O fim seguiria o mesmo roteiro, quase que em uma versão dublada mal feita. E eles tentaram me calar a todo.
O equivalente a você sumir com o sujeito é você retirar as redes sociais.
Eu fui bloqueado, cancelado, caçado, perseguido, caluniado, demitido, exilado e asilado. Tudo para que você não tivesse acesso ao conhecimento que eu compartilho. Para que as pessoas de bem morressem de sede da verdade. Só que eu não vou parar. Na verdade, eu estou só começando. Estamos formando um grupo seleto de brasileiros que entendem o que está acontecendo e sabem o que ainda vai acontecer. Estão conscientes, preparados, e que por isso vão ser a linha de frente para enfrentar esse futuro nefasto. É você, o cidadão preparado, livre da bolha da velha mídia, da manipulação dos algoritmos das Big Tech, da censura dos tiranos. Você é o maior pesadelo do sistema. Escute o seu chamado. Chegou a hora de você fazer parte desse grupo e ser uma fonte de luz em meio à escuridão que assola o Brasil. Vamos criar o nosso próprio sistema.